Fuck me.
Polish developer People Can Fly is known for over-the-top action in games like Painkiller, Gears of War Judgment, and Bulletstorm. Their newest IP, Outriders, continues the tradition with an added dose of RPG and live service trends.
You're looking great, Podwan. Go for landing.
On the surface, the story mostly consists of routine sci-fi staples. Earth is dying, so humanity seeks refuge on the distant planet Enoch, and the first attempt to secure the planet ends up with your character being gravely wounded. Put into cryostasis to recover, you wake up 31 years later only to find yourself in the middle of an endless war between survivors. Then an unexplained anomaly bestows you with powerful godlike abilities, and you set out on a mission to bring hope to the survivors by releasing supplies trapped on the ship from Earth, which is still orbiting Enoch.
Command, we are 20 seconds to atmosphere breach. Initiate burn. Rotate on brake. Primary ignition set to 30%.
The problem with the story isn't the content, it's the presentation. Cutscenes and transitions are stiff and drab, while bugs affecting lip sync and missing audio add to the problems and make it harder to connect. For players willing to read hours of supplementary material, hundreds of optional documents and data entries give crucial insight to characters and events that are more interesting than much of the direct story. They paint a complete picture of Earth's fall and the last 3 decades on Enoch with details that are barely even mentioned otherwise, like the 3-ticket system and the floating city. It's not an ideal way to consume the story, but it adds a lot of interesting elements to an otherwise straightforward plot.
Whoa. Whoa, sorry guys. I thought this was the bathroom. You okay?
I had it under control.
Been a while.
The main strength of Outriders lies on the battlefield. A variety of firearms like sniper rifles, shotguns, and assault rifles support supernatural powers that make you a deadly force of nature. The automatic shotguns deserve special mention with thunderous audio design that enhances the feeling of obliterating nearby prey into a bloody mist. Each class regenerates health differently, like close-range Devastator kills or long-range Technomancer kills, emphasizing the varied playstyles of each. Offense is essential, and while there is plenty of cover strategically placed around each arena, it's usually more useful for your enemies than for you. Snipers dig in and flee when approached, while heavily armed breachers rush into the fray with reckless abandon. Even the basic troopers effectively use cover, toss grenades to root out campers, and reposition accordingly. The responsive AI keeps each fight interesting and tense, long after you become familiar with their tactics. As a result, gaining the advantage by thinning the ranks one foe at a time feels earned and satisfying. Bosses and elite enemies usually have altered abilities like lightning or healing that can turn the tide of battle. Interrupting these abilities with class-specific skills is helpful in more difficult fights, but the mechanics feel underdeveloped compared to other aspects of character progression. After interrupting them repeatedly, enemies become temporarily immune to the tactic, which is a weird penalty for accurately identifying and responding to an enemy's weakness. In addition to humanoids, the local wildlife will attempt to eviscerate trespassers. Small Perforo use their numbers to overwhelm and hinder your mobility, while broodmothers are capable of long-range casting and devastating melee strikes. However, the flying Strix is an early contender for most annoying enemy of the year. While more than a handful of creatures are reskinned with different status elements, the amount of variety is refreshing, ensuring that fights never feel routine. There are 4 main classes to choose from, each with 3 skill trees that alter how they function. The Devastator is the de facto tank, capable of standing their ground and soaking up ridiculous amounts of damage. The Pyromancer can hurl flames, while the Trickster favors time manipulation and hit-and-run tactics. The Technomancer is the long-range sniper of the group, capable of throwing down defensive turrets for support. Each class is a blast to play, and even though they share the same arsenal, they feel remarkably different from one another because of their strengths, weaknesses, and skills. The entirety of Outriders is playable solo, but once you get 3 players together to create beautiful destruction, you'll always want someone watching your back. The classes synergize wonderfully, due in part to each role favoring a different status element, like the Devastator's bleeding effects or the Pyromancer's burns. Typical of multiplayer games, it can be tricky to follow the plot when chatting with friends, but hitting the trenches with a superpowered squad has its own rewards. Leveling up feels significant, and each level awards stat boosts, skills, or class points up to the max level of 30. World tier is even more important, and it's the primary way to affect the game's difficulty. With each unlocked level, enemies get stronger, but the loot gets better. Dying costs progress towards the next world tier, adding important stakes to each encounter. It's a brilliant way to incentivize pushing your limits, but it's also lenient enough to be lowered at your own discretion. Loot constantly drops on the road to level cap. Swapping out weapons and armor adds even more variety to each encounter, and experimenting is heavily encouraged as you constantly get stronger. The mod system is incredibly addictive, as rare gear comes equipped with mods that can be permanently obtained by dismantling them. There are countless mods that can be collected, like Storm Whip that adds a damaging lightning bolt to attacks, or Bullet Kindling, which deals additional damage to enemies afflicted by burn. Other mods increase specific damage types or provide other incentives like Diffuse, which raises your armor and resistance when sprinting. There are so many choices to mix and match that chasing the ideal build takes considerable investment, and getting lucky with a perfect drop brings a rush of dopamine. Over 50 optional side quests, bounties, and hunts round out the main campaign. Each new location features a collection that adds more narrative insight into the surrounding area and rewards additional XP and loot. However, exploring isn't very engaging, as the linear environments feel small and isolating. After the credits roll, which can take anywhere from 15 to 30 hours, Endgame expeditions attempt to keep you engaged for the foreseeable future, tasking Outriders with clearing new areas as quickly as possible. Finishing swiftly earns a rank of gold, silver, bronze, or worse, which affects the amount of rewards upon completion. While incentivizing speed and efficiency seems to make sense with the game's vicious combat, not every build focuses on DPS, making the mode feel particularly limiting. There is a unique boss to work towards as part of the final expedition, but the narrative at this point feels like an afterthought, making the grind solely about dealing damage. Launch week hasn't been kind to Outriders. Freezes and crashes have been common. Connection issues have hindered crossplay from functioning properly, and it's been difficult to simply log in and play. The game is at its best when played with 2 other people, but finding a full squad has been difficult. Attempts to alleviate these issues have also introduced a major bug that completely wipes player inventories. People Can Fly has scrambled to release additional updates to get the problem under control while working on restoring items to players who have been affected, but there's still work to be done. Online-centric games launching with these kinds of small issues are all too common, but the prospect of losing dozens of hours of progress makes playing Outriders in its current state a risky proposition.
This is a new beginning. You could have a family here, build a cabin, grow old and get fat.
That's not me, Cap. Know my way around bullets, not kids.
Outriders blends frenetic combat and hard-hitting class skills to make each encounter feel tense and rewarding. Chasing loot drops and collecting mods to bolster your collection is as addictive as using Storm Whip on vulnerable foes. The presentation makes it hard to connect with the characters, but players willing to read a lot may be surprised by how much thought has been put into things behind the scenes. With the current state of problems, however, waiting a bit longer for things to get sorted out is recommended.
Same shit, different planet.
Oczywiście.
Final score, 7 out of 10. Easy Allies reviews are made possible by generous viewers just like you. If you like what you see, check out patreon.com/easyallies to help us make more. For just $1 a month, you can gain access to exclusive shows like Achieve It Yourself, currently going live for patrons on Tuesday mornings.